Hi VC, it's that time of year where everyone starts doing best of lists, and not having an original thought in my head, I thought I'd do exactly the same. So this is my favourite 10 albums of 2021. It's new releases and it's reissues that came out in 2021. Some of these you will have seen before on my channel, others you won't, because I don't show everything as and when I buy it. So I may not say too much about some of these things because you've heard it all before. But yeah, this is my top 10 for 2021. So start off with something you haven't seen here yet. New one on me. It's by a guy called Nolan and his album Music is Dead. And the first thing to say about this is what a great album cover that is. I love covers like that where your eyes drawn in and you see something new all the time, and I'm presuming that's a representation of his home studio or something. There's kind of various instruments lying around, flutes and keyboards and computers, and this is very much in the vein of the first McCartney album or Emmett Rhodes. It's a one-man band effort. It's psych pop, it's baroque, it's Beach Boys influences on here and the Beatles, and slightly more neo-psych, things like Spiritualized, and it's quite a find. It goes from fairly mellow, chilled material to some pretty insistent stuff. There's second track on the first side, Stubborn Bubble, which the riff on that just sounds like something that Wilco Johnson would have hammered out in Dr. Feelgood. And it's got that kind of angular, stabbing, post-punk feel to the riff. And at one point, Nolan Potter's soloing wildly under that riff as well, and it's just such a great track. And elsewhere, you've got sort of almost krautrock type motoric grooves. Some great harmonies. He's got a pretty strong voice, obviously very adept at a lot of musical instruments. So I guess if you're into Emmett Rhodes, Beck, Spiritualized, Doug Tuttle, and that kind of neo-psych, this could be right up your alley. Really good album. So that's number 10. Number 9. An album I've had for many years, but this was reissued, I think, for Record Store Day in 2021. UFO's Fawcett. But it's a double album, and the second disc on this is a live recording from the record plant in LA in 1975, which is the reason to get it, really. It's a great track listing for that second disc. And yeah, I have my original copy of Fawcett, which is what I'll play if I want to hear the album. But like I say, I got it for the second disc, and it's superb. I think the live material's been available on sort of CD compilations and live box sets and things before, but as far as I know, it's the first time it's been officially available on vinyl. Great stuff. Then number 8. And this is an album, came out in 1997, and it's a band who I think a lot of people dismissed as a novelty act at first, and had a big hit in the UK called All Right, which sort of painted them as these kind of cheeky chappies. And in fact, Steven Spielberg contacted them apparently because he wanted to make a TV program around them, make them like the New Monkees. And to their credit, they turned him down because they just thought, no, we're musicians, we're not going to be a bunch of puppets for you. And they proved it was the right decision, because their second album, In It For The Money, is a spectacular album. Like I say, it came out in 1997, bought the CD back then, not really knowing much about them, apart from they were getting rave reviews for their music in Q magazine at the time. And they were making all the right noises about this band, you know, having some musical ambition and great musicianship. And this album, to me, is an all-time classic, one of the best albums of the 90s, and there were a lot of great albums in the 90s. Perhaps a lot of people didn't realise at the time, but looking back, that was a golden era for music. So this is a reissue. Like I say, it comes in a nice textured sleeve and on very attractive turquoise vinyl. And it's a double disc, not that it's a double album. The second disc is a 12-inch single, which is on a slightly more subdued white vinyl. And to be honest, the second disc is hardly worth having because it's pretty much remixes of a couple of their tracks, and it's got that typical 90s dance act remix kind of a feel where you just think they've taken one tiny element of a band's song and then just stuck on some processed beats. Doesn't really bear up to repeated listening, but the original album is a classic and I love it. And it's a pretty good pressing. It's not faultless. I think the sound's perhaps a little bit compressed, despite the fact that I think it claims to be from the original master tapes. It does. But I think whoever did the mastering for vinyl probably was trying to replicate the sound of CD rather than bringing out the nuances of vinyl. But it's good to have. Great to hear it on vinyl. Brilliant album. Okay, so number 7. Bit of a twofer here, because one of these came out in 2020 and the other came out in 2021. First, 2021. It's a Licorice Quartet and their Threesome, Volume 2. Does it say that on it? Yes, it does. And this is the one that came out in 2020. And it was this one first got me into this band. I stumbled on the track Lighthouse Spaceship, some Spotify playlist that I was listening to, and I thought, my God, this is such a good track. This is incredible. It really reminds me of sort of Jellyfish and bands like that. Only to find out it's actually a band completely made up of ex-Jellyfish members. So, yeah, no wonder it caught my attention. These are just 12-inch EPs, 4 tracks on each side, and the 4 tracks on the B side of each is an instrumental version of the tracks on the A side. So it's good to hear the instrumental versions, particularly as Jellyfish and the Licorice Quartet have always been so precise at putting their music together. They're works of art. So it's good to hear the instrumental versions, but I do look forward to hearing a full album by them, hopefully in the not too distant future. Great stuff. Where are we at? Number 6, I think. This I've shown before. Def Leppard, When the Walls Came Tumbling Down. Double live album, released for one of the record store days this year. Recorded in 1980, so it would have been after they released their first studio album and were probably working on songs for the second album. And like I said before, risk of repeating myself, this just shows what hungry, talented bunch of young musicians they were. I mean, I think they're all pretty much teenagers at the time. But hearing their performance here, you can understand why they went on to be such a major act. It wasn't all down to Mutt Langer's production techniques or anything like that. These guys had the talent to take them all the way. Number 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Number 5. Oh yes, shown this recently as well. KK's Priest. Don't need to say a lot about this. It's heavy metal. It's very well played. It's packed full of every cliche you could want or want to avoid in heavy metal, but it's done with such energy and such spirit that I find it irresistible. despite the fact there are tracks called things like Metal Through and Through and Raise Your Fists. I mean, they didn't really have to think too far out of the box to come up with those titles. I mean, they're pretty cliched, but this is just a fun album from beginning to end. Number 4. Number 4 was number 1 in my Power Pop Top 20. And it's Welcome Into State Managers by Fountains of Wayne. Now, this reissue came out in 2020, but the red vinyl variant, which this is, didn't come out till 2021. So I'm going to include it. It's an incredible album, one I return to again and again, and I urge anyone who has a passing interest in intelligent pop music to give it a listen, because they are so much more than just the writers of Stacey's Mom. So there you go, Fountains of Wayne, my number 4. And number 3, I don't think I've shown this. I've certainly shown a Nucleus Greatest Hits before, I think. But this is a reissue of Ian Carr's Belladonna. And yeah, this came out in 1972. The hype label tells me it features the cream of the UK jazz fraternity from the 70s. And they're not wrong. And this is an incredible album, and it's very much jazz rock. There's no escaping the fact there are rock musicians on here. Certainly the drummer sounds like a rock musician. He reins it in, he keeps it simple, and allows the jazz heads to do their thing over the top. And it's a mesmerising album. Hypnotic, I love it. Ian Carr's an incredible musician, a great trumpet player. And you also have on here superb sax work, tons of wah-wah guitar. It's a classic, an absolute stonewall classic. And if you love stuff like Miles Davis's Electric Period, Bitches Brew and so on, this is one for you. And the Mr. Bongo label, who released this, done a spectacular job. If all their releases are like this, I'm going to be searching through, the other stuff that they've put out, because not only does it look the part, they've reproduced the whole Vertigo Inner Bag and label, but the pressing is pristine, absolutely beautifully quiet, so involving. You listening to this album, shut your eyes and you'd swear the band is in the room with you. And the separation of instruments is so good, you almost feel like you get up and walk around between the different musicians. It's spectacular. Don't hold back on buying this reissue. I mean, it's not even worth waiting for an original, I don't think, because this is just so good. And number 2, I've shown this before, shouldn't be a surprise, Bill Fay's Time of the Last Persecution. An incredible album. Acid folk, I suppose you'd call it. He has a slight spiritual bent in his lyrics. Has a fragile voice, but the music isn't fragile. It's heartfelt. It's at times discordant and aggressive. Some great guitar playing on here. It's an album that you might be turned off it by his vocals, but if you like his vocals, it is one of the greatest albums of its type that I've heard. Absolutely love it. Great album. Then my number 1, and I've definitely not shown this before on the VC, and this album came out in 2000 originally, I think, so turn of the millennium. Again, one I bought on CD and played to death. In fact, when I bought it, I had no idea who they were, but I lived near a CD shop. Yeah, it was late 90s, early noughties. There weren't many record shops around, but this CD shop would sell back catalogue CDs, all new stuff, 3 for 20 quid. and they had all the new releases as well. So come payday, I'd go in, I'd get 3 back catalogue CDs to educate myself, stuff I'd missed over the years, and I'd buy 1 new release. Didn't matter what it was. I'd read the hype stickers on the CD box and go on that, and I got some great stuff as a result of that. Not least the Optimist LP by Turin Brakes. And this album, I've lost track of how many times I must have played this over the years. It's just one of those albums that it just sounds so beautiful. Always so relaxing to listen to. I mean, the lyrics are great, the musicianship is amazing. It just gives me a warmth inside to listen to this album. They sort of lumped in with the neo folk scene, I suppose, and there's folk elements, but it's not that kind of Finger and Ear, Wicker Man, Corn Dolly sort of folk. It's just beautiful songwriting, beautifully realised. And this reissue, it's a 20th anniversary edition, but it actually came out 21 years after the original album. Comes on amber vinyl. It's a double disc, and the second disc is made up of demos of each of the tracks that ended up on the final album. And you can see that their vision was intact right from the demo stage. The demos themselves are, works of beauty, stripped back in many cases, but entirely recognisable as what would make it onto the album. You can stream this easily enough, and I urge you to do so, because it is just such a good album. Such a good album. And again, the 90s, the early noughties were a really good time for music. I think I dismissed that era myself a bit at the time, but sometimes you don't realise how good something is when you're living through it. But this is one of my all-time favourites, and I'm so pleased to see it get a reissue, because the originals are very difficult to track down on vinyl. So that's it for my top 10. Turin Brakes at number 1. But I have a couple of honourable mentions, and possibly the only reason these didn't make the top 10, partly because it's hard to knock someone else out, but also because I've not had these very long, so it'd be unfair to promote them into the top 10 when they still haven't completely sunk in. One of them is the Tea Party's latest release, Blood Moon Rising. And I have long loved the Tea Party. They're another band that I discovered just by picking up one of their CDs in that same CD shop. And the first 2 albums I love, Splendor Solis and Edges of Twilight. And back then they were, I suppose the easiest way of describing them would be as a band sounded like Led Zeppelin with Jim Morrison on vocals and with a ton of sort of ethnic percussion and instrumentation going on. And I saw them live around the time of the second album, and they were incredible. And I don't think it mean an awful lot in this country. They're from Canada, and I think their biggest fan base is probably in Australia, which must be an absolute nightmare when they're arranging tours to see their faithful. But this is a really decent album. It's a good listen. It is made up of a bunch of tracks that were recorded over the last 5 years, so it's more of a compilation of ideas that they've had kicking around for a while, and as such it hasn't really connected with me as a coherent album, but it's just great to hear them back together and recording again. So I shall be giving that one a lot more time. And then this is a band I'm supposed to be seeing live tonight, but with the Omicron variant running rampant, I'm having second thoughts about getting out to a gig at the moment. And it's The Darkness and their latest album, Motorheart. And this is a band that tends to divide opinion, very much so in the amongst heavy rock fans. Sometimes I think rock fans don't like humour in their music, but the thing about Darkness is they're huge fans of heavy rock and heavy metal, and they play it so well They just don't have the usual, you know, KK's Priest cliched lyrics. They will write songs about dinner ladies and on here, welcome to Glasgow, and it's their ode to the wonders of Glasgow and its women and its okay food. They're a great band. I love them. They're always very entertaining live. And this album, I just haven't had time to listen to it enough to put it into the top 10. But I love it, and I am particularly delighted that they've got Roger Taylor from Queen, got his son Rufus Taylor in the band now, because I think he's a great fit in terms of musicianship and personality. He just seems to have slotted right in. So there you go, The Darkness, Motorheart. Don't dismiss it if you haven't heard it. So that's my favourite 10, maybe 12 albums of 2021. And I'm looking forward to the vinyl tags coming out in the new year. So you'll probably see me, if not before then, you'll definitely see me doing a vinyl tag. So until then, keep well, have a good Christmas and a good New Year. See you soon. Bye.